Hi, my name is William. I'm a student here at J-Tech. Today we're going to go over the systems and components of a vehicle. Alright, first system we're going to go over is the engine itself. The engine actually converts chemical energy to mechanical energy so that the vehicle can move. Some of the major components of the engine are the block. The engine block is the main supporting structure for all the engine parts. The upper section of the engine block contains the cylinder heads and pistons. The lower section of the engine block forms the crankcase, which supports the main bearings, crankshaft, camshaft, and balance shafts. The cylinders are large holes in the block in which the pistons move up and down. This would be your cylinders. The pistons, which right here inside this one is your piston. Piston fits in the cylinder like a close-fitting movable plug. The piston comprises many parts, together refers as the piston assembly. And this is a flywheel. It's a heavy metal disc that bolts to the rear of the crankshaft. This is utilized to start the vehicle with the starter. When the starter engages, it turns that to help the motor turn over to start. This is actually an example of a piston. This would be a crankshaft. The main role of the crankshaft is to transfer the up and down stroke of the piston into rotary motion. This is an automatic transmission. An automatic transmission has two major functions. First, the transmission can select and shift gears without input from the driver. The second, it can automatically couple and uncouple from the engine when needed. This is your torque converter. The torque converter connects the engine flywheel to the input shaft of the transmission and transmits engine torque to input shaft of the transmission. This shaft is your transmission input shaft. This is a manual transmission. The manual transmission drivetrain consists of all the assemblies that transfer power from the engine all the way to the wheels. The clutch system is the medium by which the driver can connect and disconnect the engine from the transmission. The transmission transaxle is the medium by which the driver selects through the various gears. The final drive assembly gives the final gear reduction through the axles. The final drive assembly incorporates a set of differential gears arranged so they sit between the two axles. Right here would be where the selector would connect so that the driver will be able to select the gears. And this will be the clutch assembly, which is part of a manual transmission system. Alright, now we're going to go over the steering system. The steering system provides control over the vehicle's direction of travel. The steering system has four main parts: your steering column, steering box, steering linkage, and steering knuckle. Alright, this vehicle here has a rack and pinion type steering system that runs across the vehicle and is connected via tie rod ends at both sides. Here we have the steering wheel and steering column, which runs down through the firewall down to the steering system. The steering column transmits the driver's steering effort from the steering wheel down to the steering box. The steering box converts the rotary motion of the steering wheel to linear motion needed to pivot the wheels. The steering linkage transfers the linear steering effort to the wheels by connecting them to the steering box to the steering arm on each of the steering knuckles, which pivot on the ball joints. As you see by this vehicle was a rack and pinion type system. There are two types of steering systems in a vehicle, and they are rack and pinion and parallelogram, and this vehicle has rack and pinion. Now right down here is where we have the steering column come through the firewall and comes down through to the steering system. Now we're going to go over the suspension system. The suspension system isolates the vehicle body from road shocks and vibration. The components of the system are springs, which are the flexible components. Axles used to drive or support the wheels. Your shock absorbers, which damper oscillation. And your arms, load-bearing elements, isolates from the chassis with rubber bushings that allow up and down movement of the tie rods and the tire assembly. Your rods, which are straight pieces of steel, used to control motion within vehicle suspension system, and your ball joints, which swivel connections mounted in the outer ends of the control arm. At this time, I'll go over some of the components. All right, here we have the rear leaf spring. We have our shocks, and this is our rear axle. And here we have a front shock, a coil spring, and the remaining parts of our suspension system. We have an upper ball joint and lower ball joint, lower and upper. In here we have tie rods, which isn't part of the suspension, which actually ties into the steering linkage to the rack and pinion system. Again, this is your tie rod. All right, now we're going to go over the braking system. A vehicle usually has two types of braking systems, and that's your service brake and your parking brake. This particular vehicle has drum brakes within the rear. This is our part of our drum brake system right here. The front of this system is a disc brake type system. It has a rotor and pads. The pads are on the inside and outside of the rotor, and pressure is applied to the pads, which is compressed on the disc to provide stopping power. This is a disc for a disc braking system. There would be a caliper on here with two pads that would apply pressure to each side of the disc to provide stopping power. This is the inside of the drum brake system. When the pedals are applied, the pads are pushed outward into the actual drum. And this is actually the drum. This system mounts inside of the drum. Actually, the drum goes over it actually. And like I said, the pads, pressure is applied and the pads push on the inside. Now we're going to cover the air conditioning system. The air conditioning system uses refrigerant and has four major components. The components are the compressor, the condenser, the restrictor, and evaporator. The compressor changes low pressure refrigerant gas to high pressure gas. Condenser forces the gas to become a liquid. The restrictor lowers the gas pressure. The evaporator transfers low pressure liquid to low pressure gas. The AC system is also a closed system. Now I'll go over a couple of the components. Our compressor is mounted down here under the generator, and the evaporator is mounted down under here. Now we have the heating system, and we'll go over the principles of the heating system. The heating system is comprised of the radiator, the thermostat, water pump, upper and lower, radiator hose. This time I'll go over some of the components and actually point them out. This is our radiator. Whoop. You have an upper hose. You have a lower radiator hose down at the bottom. That will be down here under this housing. Now the thermostat regulates the engine temperature within the block. It opens and closes at whatever temperature is rated, and it's rated at to allow system to flow, water to flow through the block to cool the block. And then we'll also have the water pump, which would be mounted here, right here behind this fan. Behind this pulley is your water pump. The water pump helps the flow of the water through the system.
And services.
This time we're going to go over the electrical system and some of the components. The electrical system consists of switches, fuses, circuit breakers, resistors, capacitors, and relays. We also have the battery. The battery provides the energy needed to start the vehicle. It converts the chemical energy into electrical energy. The electrical energy is then sent through the starter during cranking. The starter then changes the electrical energy to mechanical energy to start the vehicle. Some of the other electrical components in the vehicle are the alternator, and the alternator is used to help recharge the battery within the system. Here we have one of our fuse and relay boxes under the hood. We have our battery. Here we have the alternator slash generator alternator, which recharges the battery. Next, we'll go over the actual starter, how the system starts and how the motor operates when it's cranking and running. It's important to maintain your vehicle by performing regular maintenance on your vehicle, to include your fluid changes such as your oil, your brake fluid, your power steering fluid, such things like that. Transmission would also need to be served as per the service manual. You want to make sure you also check your wheels and tires on a regular basis, have them serviced, balanced, and rotated when necessary. Your cabin filters need to be checked. Power steering needs to be flushed, and you need to be checking the belt to make sure the belts need to be replaced. Like I said, you need to maintain your vehicle in a correct working order by conducting all the recommended services. And here we have an example of the 4-stroke engine, gasoline engine.